Property tax rates in Hawaii can be deceiving, and looking at what the current owner pays versus what you would actually pay could be different, and it can be deceiving. So we'll talk about all that coming up next. Alright, so before we get into talking about property tax rates specifically, I want to talk about property taxes in Hawaii and the system in general, so you have a basic understanding of what you're dealing with and that you're looking at the right information. So every island in Hawaii is a county, and each county has a different tax rate and a different tax system, different tax classifications. So depending on where you want to buy in Hawaii, you do need to look at the county and see specifically what the tax rates are in that county. They do vary a little bit. A lot of times the classifications may be different, but the rates are similar to the other islands, but they do vary, so you want to look specifically at each island and what the specific requirements are. And so what we're going to do next is we're going to jump into looking at the specific rates in the Big Island and talking about a couple of things that you need to understand so you can see the difference between what the current owner pays and what you may pay depending on how you're going to use that property. So we're going to get into the data. So this is a breakdown of the property tax classifications and rates for the county of Hawaii. So again, this will be different for other counties, but this will give you a good general idea of what the tax rates are here depending on how you use the property. So some things that we got to understand first is that the property taxes are charged on a county assessed value, right? So that's not necessarily the market value, and sometimes that lags over time with being updated. So when a property sells and the value is updated, it could change the basis which the taxes is charged on. So that's one thing you kind of got to think about too, is seeing what the actual county assessed value is, because a lot of times owners don't want that value to be high because they're going to be paying more taxes, right? So if the county assessed value is low for a property, an owner's not going to tell the county to up their property assessed value. And so that's one thing that can be deceiving, is that the taxes are being charged on a lower value than the property is actually worth. So that's the first thing to understand. The second thing to understand with this table here is it's confusing. So they break the county property tax rates down by per $1,000 net taxable value. Super complicated. The easy way to figure this out is you move the decimal point 1 point to the left, and then now it's a percentage, right, of the overall assessed value. And so, for example, if you look at the first affordable rental housing number at $6.15 per $1,000 of net taxable value, it's really just 0.615%, right? So that's an easier way to kind of think about it, how normal people look at values and calculate costs based on a percentage. And so you can see all of the different classifications here. We're not going to focus on all of them because most of the time you're not going to deal with most of these classifications, right? Most people are not going to be dealing with, apartment or commercial or industrial zone properties. And so we're going to focus on first the residential classification. And what's important here is that there are two different rates based on the value of the property. And so if the property is a very high-end property and there is valuation above $2 million, you're going to pay 1.36% on the amount above $2 million. So you're going to pay 1.11% on the valuation below $2 million, and then anything above it, so it's 2.5 million, you're going to be paying on that 500,000, you pay that higher tax rate. So it's a little bit complicated to calculate depending on the value of the home. Most people are going to be under the $2 million valuation, and so they would pay a 1.11% valuation on residential property. But that can be deceiving because this is if it's a rental or non-owner occupied, non-primary residence property. So this is the regular residential rate on property that is not owner occupied or a primary residence. And so if we go down here to the next rate, the homeowner rate down here at the bottom, this is the one if you are an owner occupant and you have to apply with the homeowner's exemption to the county and file some paperwork to get the lower rate, and you also get some exemptions off of your taxable value of the property. It lowers your property taxes pretty significantly. So in this case, it's 0.615%, so almost half of what the cost would be if it's a second home or a rental property. And so first, it's important, how are you going to use the property? Because that could be different from what the current owner is doing, right? If the current owner is an owner occupant and they're getting the homeowner's exemption and they're getting this lower rate and you're planning to buy it as a rental or a second home and you're not going to own or occupy it, you're going to pay a higher rate and your taxes will be higher than they were for the current owner. And the vice versa is true, right? So if you are looking to buy and own or occupy, but the house is currently a rental or a second home, the current owner's tax rate is not going to be reflective of what your tax rate is going to be. Your tax rate is going to be lower. And so you don't want to always put a lot of weight into what the current taxes are. You want to look at what your current situation is and what your plan for the property is to figure out what your tax rate is. So you do have to do some paperwork after you close in order to get the lower rate, and you do have to be an owner-occupant. And I have a separate video on that, which I'll link to, that explains the homeowner's exemption for property taxes in Hawaii. But in general, a lot of people say, hey, property taxes in Hawaii seem pretty low compared to where they're coming from or other places that they've lived. And that's because Hawaii doesn't pay for our educational system through property taxes, where in most municipalities, that's how the educational system is financed. So we finance our educational system through the general fund, and I'll do another video on our general excise tax and how that all plays out. So this is your general rundown of property taxes in Hawaii. It's very important to understand the different classifications and then how you qualify to get those different classifications, and then figure out how you plan to use the property, because that's going to affect your overall tax rate. So whatever the current taxes are doesn't mean it's going to be your taxes. If you have any specific questions, you can always reach out, Dylan@buybigisland.com, or put them in the comments and we'll get back to you. Appreciate you guys watching. Aloha.